Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
If I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now watch this. Look, a snake's up in the tree. Honey badger don't care. Honey badger don't give a shit. It just takes what it wants.
Oh, and it did it to me again. I hate what it does with my phone, but let's try to get my phone up and running. This program has been really screwing up with that. But hello, everyone. Let's see if we can, there we go, perfect. I'm going to tell you something just really funny and pathetic. So when the countdown timer's going, when no one could possibly know exactly what I'm going to say, only that I think that I gave my final conclusion on this little report we're going to go over. Some seriously butthurt people, because I can see things that you guys can't, because I can see into the YouTube backend, and Ecamm shows me reactions. And 4 people just had to compulsively thumbs down. I take that as a badge of honor. So anyway, this is going to be an interesting show. It'll probably be a long one as well. So strap in. But before we get started, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, particularly if you're one of my newer watchers. But either way, even if you're a hate watcher, subscribe. That way you know each time that I'm live, so you can come give a thumbs down. Let me just give you a hint. All interaction on YouTube is good interaction and boosts the algorithm. Thank you. Also, follow me on Twitter. I'm Karen Ann Harlos. I'm also on Facebook, but Facebook just is tumbleweeds right now. And last but not least, You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. Now, something I haven't done in a while that we're going to do here before we get started is, because I've been thinking about Sean, I'm going out to Pork Fest. I'm leaving Wednesday morning. There might be a show tomorrow night. I do not know if there will be. If there is, it will be history, because I prepared the hell for this one. History, it doesn't take nearly as much preparation, but I did want to, over here, Sean Dempsey's 2 children's books that I highly recommend, and that's Sean, S-E-A-N, Dempsey, out of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. It's Ava and the Storm and the Tale of Two Brothers. You can get these on Amazon, and another Libertarian would truly, truly appreciate your support. And something that I didn't tell you, even though the arrangements are still being made, and by the way, if you're at Pork Fest, I think I'm speaking on Thursday afternoon. I have to look at the schedule again. And thank you so much for the super chat, Samuel. I do think I'm speaking Thursday afternoon. I'm speaking on Liberty Evangelism. But what I also wanted to announce, again, though, the arrangements are still being finalized, but I've been asked to be the headline speaker at this year's Anarchon in Virginia. So when I have more details on that, it's beginning of August, I will get it to you. But that is freaking exciting. Hopefully I don't well, I'm already on a million government lists. What am I fooling myself? Being a head speaker at Anarchon is not going to put me on any more lists than I already am on. Damn, pink-haired anarchist, but maybe I have a pink heart as well. As you can see, I really, I've got a full complement of wine, which I will need for the show. This is our homemade white sangria. It's very good. Okay, so let me give a bit of an intro of how this is going to go. I got all kinds of stuff printed out. So we're going to go through some of this report. I'm not going to go line by line. D.L. Cummings, and if I remember, it's in the low bar already, but I'll try to remember, where is it, over here? I'll try to remember that I want to put up, you know, as a card, a link to his video so you can go check it out. D.L. Cummings is a gem. It's Liberty Dad on YouTube. He did a very calm, professional review of the Classical Liberal Caucus alleged, what do they call it? State of the Libertarian Party report, or they've been shorthand referring it to as a report card. That's how I've been referring to it. He did a really good breakdown on it. We are going to play clips of his breakdown, interspersed with my commentary, because some things he says better than I could. But one thing I want to get out front, just because I'm playing clips from DL definitely would not agree with everything I'm going to say, and DL, being the consummate gentleman, probably would not refer to some of the way I express myself at times. But, you know, different strokes, different folks, there's different, as he said, and that's why I played the clip earlier, there was someone on Twitter who didn't really know me well who was upset at my decorum, apparently. And DL said, "Sir, you are speaking to the LP's honey badger." And I just laughed my tail off. So yes, I will be the LP's honey badger. I think that honey badger don't give a shit. So yes. Now, before this, and you could go to the Classical Liberal Caucus's site and get this. Most people have seen it. Before we get to going into it, I want to give you a little bit of a backstory that you might not be aware of. Mr. Casey sent it to the LNC before publishing it for comment. And okay, I think that's cool to do. But to my recollection, and he can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, I can tell you it certainly wasn't a regular practice. That is the first time this LNC had ever heard from Mr. Casey. So it was somewhat surprising that the first direct contact that we had via the email system was, oh, I've done this smear report on you guys, and what do you think of it? And, you know, I think that said plenty. And DL's going to get into that without knowing that part, but he nailed it just from the tone. I want to tell you what I wrote back to Mr. Casey. And we will get into the part of the report that I'm referring to. But on May 25th at 4:44 a.m., I was up early. There are serious rhetorical and principle issues. But when a document mentions hateful, at the same time it purposely skews numbers and also cries peace, I'm reading propaganda. So if I had to give a too long didn't read for the show, what I wrote to Mr. Casey would be the too long didn't read. I think I might actually have it here that I can show you what I wrote. Yes, there are serious other rhetorical and principle issues, but when a document mentions hateful, at the same time it purposely skews number, and that should have been numbers, and cries peace, I'm reading propaganda. And I stand by that assessment. I'm also going to just say in pictorial form what half of the report can be reduced down to is this. So, if you're not watching, you have to watch it to take a look at the screen. So, let me move past the first page, table of contents. No, I'm not going to be kind to this report because I don't think it deserves kindness. As I said on my other show, I really think it's a very pretty, somebody obviously spent a lot of time on it, piece of propaganda bullcrap. It reads super, super tone deaf and pretentious. D.L. Cummings will get into this. I'm going to play multiple clips by D.L. They are taken out of order of his show because I thought they were good to front load. Some very astute observations that he made, and then you can see I have highlighted something specifically we're going to go over. So take it away, DL.
Rather than read like earnest critique that might persuade the LNC or observers to take even some of the advice, it reads like a 20-page confirmation of what critics already believe and have no interest in reconsidering otherwise.
Yes, it pretends like this is just an honest examination. And we are just really super sincerely giving recommendations that are not all slanted or biased. And we're the ones that want peace and fairness. And we just have all of these wonderful solutions because we're just wonderful, wonderful people. And ignore that we called you hateful. Yeah, let's hear some more from DL.
Furthermore, the recommendations appear to only suggest returning to the ways of old and disregarding the many members who have found those ways ineffective or needing refinement. That isn't listening to members.
Yes, it's extremely tone deaf, to put it a little bit more bluntly, as the honey badger would. If they were really seriously interested in dialogue and how can we improve this, how can we improve that, because there is always, baby, room for improvement. What this is an extended ad for the Classical Liberal Caucus, posing as an honest critique. It's like an infomercial. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Just be honest about that's what you're doing. I don't mind caucuses pimping themselves. I do mind caucuses pimping themselves dishonestly on the back of what is supposedly an unbiased review. I don't mind propaganda as long as it's not pretending to be anything other. That is deceitful.
Now, my final sticking point is the lack of anything positive about the LNC. The report is entirely negative. If we're following the idea that communication ought to be effective, given the current division within the party, the CLC should step back and ask themselves what they thought they would accomplish with such a negative report.
What they hoped to accomplish was to pimp their caucus. And again, that's okay. Just don't pretend like you're doing something otherwise. And something I am generally known for, because I try to make a habit of it. And those that will not concede that I do this are simply not looking, because people who spend a lot of time with me know I do this. Even in criticism, I try to find something good to say. Because even Hitler didn't kick every dog on the street on the way down. It's a good practice in just being a good person to always try to find something genuine to compliment. When you put out something that is all negative, again, I'm reading propaganda. Even after everything that the past LNC did to me, even when I was at my most fiery and critiquing them, I always found some good things to say. And when they did some things I didn't even have to find that were good, that were just good, I mentioned it. Because you want to know why? People trust you when they see that you are stating something against your own self-interest and against your own rhetoric. They don't do that at all here. And that is a big, big tell. Everyone who approved this, even the people that I really like in the CLC, and there are people I really like, shame on you. Seriously, shame on you. When there are other volunteers in the party, even ones you really, really disagree with, you can't find one good thing to say on something you just spread all over the internet. Really, take a hard look at what you really think you are trying to do. And honestly, people who do that shouldn't be anywhere near positions of leadership unless they step back and go, you know what? That was really shitty. As I said, I can even find something to compliment Satan on. The joke is he looks really good in red. Not everyone can pull that off. The accessorizing of the pitchfork is spot on. Take it away some more, DL.
The CLC should ask themselves if they really believe this report would motivate those with whom they disagree to do things differently. My suspicion is that they are unsurprised by the reaction.
Of course, because that wasn't the goal. The goal wasn't really to turn things around, as they would put it. The goal wasn't to spur positive change. The goal was to start laying the foundation for their conventioneering in 2024. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's the hiding as something else that there's something wrong with. This should have just been said, what the CLC has problems with in our vision for the future, rather than some kind of objective report card. And that's why it gets an F. It's not because everything they say is wrong. Because I'm going to say some nice things. Let me front load with some nice things. As I said, the report, obviously, someone spent a lot of time on this. There are no typos. It's professionally presented if you just look stylistically without looking at substance. But it's a piece of convention propaganda, and don't pretend it's anything otherwise.
The report says...
Oh, wait, I don't want to start this yet. Hold on. Let me go back to here. I didn't mean to go... That's interesting. Okay, never mind. I didn't mean to go right to that. I want to start now with some of my own highlights and commentary. So, in the introduction is really interesting. It says, data devoid of an understanding of an organization's mission is a ship without rudders or sails. I agree. And I assert that they fundamentally truncate the organization's mission. And I have the bylaws on my side. I also have history on my side. So he says, and I say he because I'm assuming Jonathan Casey had a big hand in this, but it might not have been. So let's use they because I'm not sure. And it said, they're here to try to provide those sails and rudder by defining the Libertarian Party's mission. Dear sirs, the mission is already defined in the bylaws. It takes an awful lot of chutzpah to think you're going to do it. And then the CLC envisions. That's probably the most honest thing said in this report as far as their motivation. This is their vision, but that's super tone deaf, because why do they even need to stay it? It seems like there was a big upset at last convention, and you would think that if you were really so concerned about members and so concerned about inclusivity and so concerned about hearing other people, other than one sentence where you barely acknowledge that the LNC fell flat in its face during COVID, you do not deal with the pain points that people expressed loud and clear last convention. You just ignored that. That is not listening to members. That is huffing your own farts. Then saying you need a comprehensive review to fulfill the Libertarian Party's objectives. Objectives pursuant to who? Okay. He acts like the objectives that they state are just objectively true or objectively complete, and they are not. This report will examine 3 key areas: financial health, membership, and ballot access. There are more areas that could be examined, but okay, they define their report. Each section will kick off with a thorough overview. I don't think it's quite that thorough. But anyway, of all collected data, and then concentrate on contrasting the data from 2022, 2023 with preceding 2- and 4-year cycles. Data doesn't speak to itself. Data requires interpretation. Let's just get that out in the open, and everybody will have a slightly different interpretation. This report is designed to reflect the current state of the Libertarian Party using publicly available information and to propose viable strategies to turn things around. Notice how it front-loaded its conclusion. So we will try not to dwell on how we arrived here, but they don't. They do, but they don't. They do slightly to take slams at the current leadership, but they don't to understand why there was basically a revolt of the membership in Reno. They have not yet coped with that, and they don't do any coping with that here. But rather, how we can move forward. You mean how you can create the party in your own image. Got it. So we're going to play a couple more clips here, and I think I missed one. No, I didn't. We're going to play a couple more clips here from DL. He's going to talk about the methodology. Let's hear that.
The report says, this report is designed to reflect the current state of the Libertarian Party by using publicly available information and to propose viable strategies to turn things around. My first issue is that this report tells me its conclusion right away. Things need to be turned around. Page 2 and the report already suggest it is biased and lacks objectivity.
It doesn't suggest it, it outright says it. Dave, we're on the air a lot. The name is completely slipping me. Oh, Timcast. Timcast is bigger than most conventional media, and Angela has been on that twice. Angela was in front of the press at the Already Against the Next War rally. This LNC has gotten more press. I would say Nick got a decent amount of press as well. Oh my God, I'm saying something nice about someone I don't like. Nick was pretty good at getting press as well. But to say we haven't ever been on the air, I just don't think that's objectively true. We haven't been on Kennedy. That is a fact. That is disappointing. Let's go on to another clip here.
At the beginning, in the introduction, the CLC stated, "This report will attempt to refrain from finger-pointing or blame allocation. We will try not to dwell on how we arrived here, but rather how we can move forward." Assume for the moment that the CLC's prediction was indeed a discovery, and one with solid confidence. This is the question I would ask of them. Rather than waiting an entire year to report on what you were certain was to be true, what did you do to alter the party's course?
I know, very little, because we never heard from them till then. This was the first time, again, he can correct me if I'm wrong, if it was not the first time, it wasn't memorable, that we even heard from Mr. Casey. There was no trying to work with the LNC. We're going to get to a little bit of this to contrast their reaction and their behavior with my reaction and my behavior with some disagreements I had with the LPCO board. And you will see they are completely different. The CLC laid in wait. I'm not good with lay. They crouched in wait for a year to spring something negative that they were convinced was going to happen the day after Reno. They did nothing to try to turn things around, but snipe on Twitter. Now, you have every right to do that, and I have every right to ask the question. During the period of time of my, what I call my exile, I was still working for the party. I didn't care for that LNC, which was an understatement, but I wrote them regularly. I still volunteered for things. I was still on committees. I traveled the country fundraising. What have they done? They've built their caucus, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you don't get to be all high and mighty. The suggestion that DL said, well, where have you been the past year, is a good one. Are you only willing to pitch in and help and try to deal with people that you don't agree with when you're in charge? That's not leadership. And I feel I am one of the few people that can actually speak to this because I really had to live that. And certainly I sniped at the past LNC, but I also worked, and I also fundraised, and I also implored people to work and fundraise. I also worked with people on the LNC that I got along with and that I agreed with. I never stopped. You know, the amount of justified sniping you can do is directly proportional to the amount of productive work you're putting in. And you put a lot of productive work into your caucus, but you really haven't into the national party that you are sniping. Can't say what you're doing at your state parties. I don't have my nose that deep into your state parties. I would hope you're doing more there. Okay, last DL clip for, well, actually, no, it's not that. We have a bunch more DL clips. They're all front-loaded in the beginning. Then there's going to be a big gap where it's mostly me talking, and then we're going to end with some of them, but we have another one to go to here.
In this report's conclusion, the CLC writes, quote, last year after Reno, the CLC stated that we see a future for the National Libertarian Party characterized by electoral failure, irrelevancy, and pandering to a small niche of political groups. The party is already experiencing a wave of disaffiliations from candidates, donors, and recurring members. Sadly, as this report has shown, this prediction is proving accurate. If one knows enough to make a prediction of discovery with any confidence, then one has essentially already made the discovery. Only routine checking remains.
Yes, they had already decided this the day after Reno. And notice the loaded language, and notice not a sober assessment. And we're going to get into some of this, but is always, and I'm just throwing this out there, I'm not saying I like this, but is always, if we're just thinking analytically, is it always better to have more members, or is it better to have committed members? That's a valid question. The fact is that a lot of people joined after Reno or leading up to Reno that were not members before. Why does he think the ones that have allegedly left or have actually left are more valuable than the ones we gained? On which basis do you make that assessment? It's a good question, unless you just think more is better. If more is better, then really being in a third party isn't where you belong. And really, the LP could have a lot more members if we just started embracing Trump or embracing whoever the popular leftist was. When you're a radical group like we are, you are somewhat limited in the people that are going to put money down on the line to become a member. Am I happy with the membership numbers? No. I think their comments about declining membership rates are valid concerns, but their diagnosis, I think, is completely wrong. And I think it totally dismisses and shits on the people that wouldn't join until Reno, as if they are not valuable. And that is part of the tone deafness here. And their in-group favoritism, where they pretend like their out-group doesn't even exist. They have some serious dealing with it to do. The party showed up and spoke in Reno, and they haven't dealt with that at all in here, except for bitching about what that group of delegates chose. Okay, so you're an enemy of the delegates at Reno. Got it. But don't pretend you're the great unifier and the person, the people that are there to do a broad libertarian message, as if that is the purpose of the party, which I would submit it actually isn't. But because our platform actually isn't a broad libertarian message. Our platform actually is quite specific. But how can you say we don't care about the people that were unhappy and wanted the changes without saying it? This is how you actually do it. And you can do that. You can say, fine, the people that we gained and the people that were at the convention in Reno, they're pieces of shit. We don't need them. We don't want them in the party. But have the balls to say it. Whew. Okay, now we're getting into the financial section. One thing I'm going to tell you, there's a reason I'm a secretary and not a treasurer. I'm about my minutes, my committee applications, crap like that. I am not, I've been a statewide treasurer for a nonprofit before, hated every minute of it, and promptly, and believe it or not, I was a bookkeeper for 15 years. I'm going to date myself, of service merchandise, of a whole store at service merchandise. But I've promptly forgotten all of that. And now I'm just Barbie. Math is hard. So I'm not a numbers person. I'm going to let a response that Todd Hagopian gave, and you're going to find this really interesting, respond to this. But you know, they have lots of charts, but you want to know what? I have found, I'm not a big fan of like PowerPoint type presentations. I'm not saying this is. I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a rant. I like a narrative. Charts, to me, are a cheap way sometimes of making it look like you're saying more than you are really saying. Charts have their place. I'm just saying my particular predilection, that sometimes they're used to perfume the hog, if you know what I mean, to put a bow on a turd. I prefer a narrative. Don't explain to me what it is you think I'm seeing here. But let's play a tiny bit of DL where he's getting into the financials.
Much of the debate revolves around the matter of inflation and whether to focus on 2-year or 4-year cycles. The methodology used is up to the creators of any report. If they wish their efforts to be effective, that is, seriously considered, they should choose the methodology that will be the most readily received while also providing an honest evaluation.
And that is a super good point. They are very aware that Todd Hagopian, so he's dealing with the financial section, you would want one that's going to be readily received by those of us who are following our treasurer. They know that Todd Hagopian believes that 4-year cycles are, and I actually agree with him. The political cycle is a 4-year cycle. It's not a 2-year cycle. To me, that's just a complete no-brainer. But they could have chosen a 4-year cycle. They chose not to. That was a deliberate choice. If things were so horrible, awful, terrible, why wouldn't you just use the 4-year cycle that you know the LNC uses? And also, just super curious why you don't mention in here net. You like to mention gross, but you don't mention net. It costs money to raise money. I would really love them to look at the effectiveness, how much it costs to raise each dollar of this LNC versus past LNCs. What if I spent $199,000 to raise $200,000? And you go, wow, she raised $200,000. But the net is $1,000. Now I'm using an extreme example to prove a point. None of that is mentioned in here. One thing this LNC has been really good at is the cheapness of the way that we raise money. That we raise money using less money. So the money raised, more of it goes to the bottom line. When you're evaluating charities, you look at how much goes to administrative costs. Funny that none of that's mentioned. Also funny what's not mentioned is, to me now, I'm going to tell you my honest opinion, that might be a bit of a critique, the over health of our reserve. They don't mention that the last LNC had a negative reserve in the beginning of the year just prior to Reno. We have, if not the highest reserve in decades, one of the highest reserves in decades. And why is that important? Some people would say, I know they say later here in the report, but I'm not sure I highlighted it, that people give the LNC money to do things. Sure, yes, but it's also to stay viable. We, if you haven't noticed, are in a country that's being ran by a senile old man. We are in terrible economic straits in this country. It makes sense to squirrel away some nuts for the future. We are in very, very bad financial times as a country, which doesn't factor at all into here. And a fair report would mention it. Let me see this next. I want to see what yep. Okay. Now, one of the controversies with this report is that they adjusted for inflation. So they're looking at fundraising dollars, which includes membership dues, and they adjust for inflation. Let's listen to a little bit of DL, and then we're going to show you Todd Hagopian's response and talk about the addendum that the CLC put to their report, allegedly taking into consideration Todd Hagopian's response, but they really didn't. All they did is go, wah, wah, wah. No, but we stand by what we said without really interacting with what Todd said. I didn't realize how badly they did with that until I was preparing for this show. But let's go on to DL here.
In favor of adjusting for inflation, Jonathan Casey reiterated on Twitter that adjusting for inflation was necessary to determine the party's, quote, ability to do things. He further states that adjusting for inflation provides the, quote, real value of revenue. In other words, just how far will, say, $1,000 go in, say, 2023 compared to prior years. In opposition to adjusting for inflation, Todd Hagopian's argument against it is that for, quote, inflation adjustment to be legitimate, the libertarian dues would have to have kept up with inflation. He points out that dues have remained $25 since 1991, and had they been adjusted to keep up with inflation, would roughly be about $55 in 2023. Clearly, we are the party of economic nerds. And if nothing else, that comment will at least be spot on.
And they don't deal with that at all in the report. Now, would you say that is fair? Now, you can argue, well, too bad. Too bad. But you would think there would be like a significant discussion of that said, to be fair, the bylaws set the dues, the LNC doesn't, and the dues have remained unchanged since 1991. You would think that would have been mentioned at first. If you're going to adjust for inflation, you need to note that the dues have not kept up with inflation. And some question, by the way, the bylaws committee is proposing a raise in dues. But just a point of trivia, if I remember correctly, there was a raise in dues proposed in 2018 and it got shot down. Members can't both shoot down a dues increase and then complain that dues aren't bringing in enough. You can't have it both ways.
While the CLC, Mr. Casey, says that adjusting for inflation tells us what the LNC can do on any given year, it neglects that membership dues periodically adjusted for inflation also affect what the LNC can do by virtue of total revenue.
And the fact that wasn't addressed at all shows you how deeply, deeply flawed and unfair this report is. It had a conclusion and it was going to get there no matter what. Now let's look at Todd Hagopian's response. I would really encourage you to look at the CLC's addendum in which they allegedly take into consideration Todd Hagopian's response and see if it fairly deals with it. Let's pull up what Todd had to say. I know it's kind of small, but I'm going to read this in full, or maybe in full. First he gives a compliment. Mr. Hagopian is very gracious. There are a few kernels of truth sprinkled in between numerous problematic statistical comparisons, which I will lay out in a moment. I won't comment on the conclusion or action items. Each individual LNC member can make their own decisions on those. I will focus solely on fact-checking the charts and providing context. God, he is such a treasurer. And I mean that in the most flattering way possible. That's not me. First, it is true that we are struggling on fundraising right now. I like that he admitted we are not where we want to be. To that extent, Mr. Casey has a kernel of truth, but he doesn't really answer why. He's already figured out why in his mind and struggles mightily to justify that. I can tell you some of the reasons why, which we'll get into later. They get into staff turnover later. Some of it is staff turnover, which isn't entirely in our control. When you do a complete radical transformation of any organization, you have high attrition. It just comes with the territory. This is rebuilding years. And It's not something I'm happy with, but it's also something not entirely unexpected in the negative sense. Also, whether people want to admit it or not, and I've been reluctant to admit it because I'm a huge Civi CRM fan. But the fact is, this term has uncovered a lot of problems with our CRM. You can deal with it or not deal with it. At this point, you don't know. You're not behind the scenes. There's a lot of problems going on. And staff has had to spend an ungodly amount of time fixing it. There also is a really bad lack of documentation. And all of those have slowed us down. It's just the reality of the situation. I know DL will not agree with me here. I don't believe that managers, chairs, leaders of any kind are, and I'm not saying he would agree with this. I'm kind of front loading some rhetoric here. Let me first give you, DL's like, well, the buck stops with the leadership. They just got to say it's their fault. I don't always agree with that. There are externalities that just aren't under people's control. What I think leadership owes members is honesty. If the CRM had a big dog of a problem and a lack of documentation, the way leadership takes accountability is to be truthful about that. Not to go, well, our CRM is having problems, or we're having this, or we're having that, but it's still all my fault. No, it isn't. There are externalities that are outside of your control. Where the rubber meets the road is how you deal with them. And I can tell you, staff has been working day and night to fix this. Sometimes you have to fix a engine before the engine can run. To expect the engine running while you're fixing it just isn't realistic. And you can snipe from the sidelines all you want. I can tell you one of our new hires, Andy Bukovic, has been working his tail off, and he's fantastic. But there are technological problems that we've been facing. Okay, let me continue here. I take serious issue with the inflation adjustment. Oh, and I'll just stop to say, us stating that there have been issues with the CRM in doing membership renewals and in doing fundraising ever since the switch from Razor's Edge to Civi CRM, which turned out to be a huge freaking mistake. Bad mistake. And it was a mistake that was sold by the last LNC and very much advocated, we can disagree on whether it's a mistake or not, by a staff member that just is no longer with us to see it through. I'm convinced it was not the right decision, and I voted for it, but I don't believe I had all the information. So I'm a little butthurt about that, but it really set us back. But it was a plan laid in place from last LNC. God, there was so the issues, or the alleged issues, with the migration from Razor's Edge, with Civi CRM, were well known. They've been discussed at many meetings which Jonathan Casey doesn't go to. When we were talking about what are you doing in this past year, him and Eagle, they don't even come to meetings to give public comment or listen. Maybe they watch them after the fact, but they're not one of the involved members that come all the time. There are people who are not fans of this LNC that still show up to the meetings. I showed up to every meeting when I wasn't a fan of the prior LNC. I even traveled to meetings when I allegedly wasn't on the LNC. He doesn't. To me, that says volumes. And neither do others in their leadership. And some of their leadership is wonderful, particularly Layla Bush, as I've said multiple times. Okay. But to not mention those issues in your report, what are you trying to give people a full picture, or are you trying to lead them down a path? I take serious issue with the inflation adjustment, which you have stated that most of your charts would be using. Adjusting donation charts for inflation hardly makes sense for a variety of reasons. First, dues have been $25 since 1991. Assuming that people will donate more because inflation went up is mildly silly. I think it's monumentally silly. It is the equivalent of saying that since someone's money is worth less, they will voluntarily go out to eat at their favorite restaurant more times a year. In order for your inflation adjustment to be legitimate, the Libertarian dues would have had to have kept up with inflation, which means we would be charging approximately $187 a year for basic membership. If that's the current proposal by the Classical Liberal Caucus, please let me know and I will happily co-sponsor it. Second, during periods of inflation, people are actually less likely to give even the amounts that they have given in the past. Whereas your assumption would be that donations would have to go up during those periods in order to keep par with the year before. This is, in fact, backed by your own chart, with the last period of unusually high inflation from 2004 to 2007 showed a stark drop-off in inflation-adjusted donations. Oh, you mean comparing like to like shows this is pretty typical? Color me shocked. For what it's worth, once the inflation rate was brought down to less than 2% for much of 2009 to 2020, you can see your 5-year inflation-adjusted revenue increasing. As we know, that period was marked by inflation of a little over 3%, whereas we have been plagued with inflation of twice that amount over the past 20 months, which will inherently skew both your adjustments of previous years upward and how much people have available to give downward. If you remove the silly inflation adjustment, here is what 2023 looks like versus the identical years in the election cycle. 2022 to 2023, 1.7 million. 2018 to 2019, 1.8 million. 2014 to 2015, 1.3 million. 2010 to 2011, 1.4 million. Notice he is doing 4-year cycles. 2006 to 2007, 1.3 million. Hardly cause for alarm. Isn't it funny that you just read things a little differently and all of a sudden the conclusion is different? And this conclusion is different while admitting we need to do much better at fundraising. The reasons why we are not are varied. All of the rest of the worst year in history arguments go out the window, and they do a lot of that. This is the worst year in the past 30 years. I mean, it is such chicken little bullshit. But as far as the charts go, I have some comments also. None of these comments are aimed at taking away the hard work you put into them. If you would like to publish a new version of this with more relevant numbers and comparisons, I would love to go over the new report with you. And then I'm not going to read all of this. I can get this to you. This isn't public because this was an email to Casey, but there's nothing private in here because he obviously sent it to a member who can publish it. I think I'm going to maybe do a Google link to this where you can see it. But let's just go to the next page where you can see he goes over each chart, noting the problems with them. They produced an addendum and didn't really deal with all of this. They just defended their adjusting for inflation. As DL said, if you wanted this to be actually received by the LNC and perceived as fair and constructive, why wouldn't you use a methodology that would be accepted? Because it didn't lead you to the conclusion that you wanted. That is why. Next, it moves on to the membership situation. And this is more the fundraising area actually both were really impacted by the razor's edge to CiviCRM and the problems with CiviCRM. It doesn't mean I think CiviCRM should be scrapped. Not at all. I think it needs to be fixed. The membership situation report. I want to tell you something crazy pants that people may not realize how our membership works. And there is a bylaws proposal to fix this. Our membership is that as long as you sign the pledge, anyone who gives $25 in donations, I think it says in donations, we can look at the bylaws wording, over the past 12 months is a sustaining member. Notice it doesn't say the $25 needs to be in one payment. And notice it doesn't say it needs to be within a calendar year. It just says in any 12-month period. Well, let's look at a hypothetical. Basic membership is $25 because I just want to show you the nightmare, the database nightmare that our bylaws have caused with the way we have our CRM. Say you give $5 a month. So you gave $5, your first $5 in January. January, February, March, April, May. After you give that $5 in May, you have become now a basic member. May 1st, let's just say, you're now a basic member. When does your basic membership expire if you do not give any more money? You cancel your $5 a month membership at that, or a $5 a month payment. Does your membership expire 12 months from May? No. It expires in January of the following year when that $5 credit you got in January the previous year drops off, putting your total down in this rolling 12-month period to $20. This is a frickin' nightmare. It is an absolute nightmare. Also, because of the wording, thank you, Mike, of donated or have donated on their behalf. Does that include t-shirt sales? Does that include buying certain things which technically are considered donations? It gets super, super crazy. As has been said at the New Mexico meeting and multiple times on the list, our staff right now, and I insisted they be confident before we start dealing with delegate allocations, is not at all confident that the numbers that have been reported out for a while now are in fact accurate because of this nightmare in accounting. Now, I know there are volunteers and past staff members who will dispute that. You know what? I'm not taking a side on that. I want the audit to take place, which is why, and you'll see people screaming and yelling about the May membership report, well, the one that would come out in June, not being out. It's because staff is doing a comprehensive audit to make sure our membership numbers are accurate. I would think you want that because when we're dealing with delegate allocation, membership numbers are everything. But we have a nightmare on our hands and the bylaws need to be fixed. This is unworkable. It is absolutely unworkable. But you hear none of that in here because they'll go, well, the past LNC dealt with it. Did they? Was it ever audited? Are you sure those membership numbers were correct? I don't know. Do I think anyone was purposely dishonest? Absolutely not. But, you know, garbage in, garbage out. When you trust what a program spits out. And we had those two separate programs. We had Razor's Edge and CiviCRM. We will see what happens when the next membership numbers come out to see if they're pretty much right where we expected or if there are some serious adjustments. And it's not the first time adjustments would need to be made. Even this report mentions that lifetime memberships had to be adjusted. I think it was in 2018 because they weren't maintained properly. But none of this is mentioned in this report. Don't you find that interesting? I find that interesting. Let's go on to DL talking about membership numbers.
The second key area of this report, membership. I will take issue with one chart in particular, the monthly membership chart on page 5. Of this chart, the CLC report says Libertarian Party membership in 2022, 2023 was fairly unremarkable until the last 4 months, where we start to see a worrying trend. Other charts attempt to illustrate similar concerns. The issue I have repeatedly brought up was that a drop in membership may not be as unexpected as presented.
Okay. memberships drop 12 months after the $25, as I gave in that rolling 12-month example, are no longer total $25. You don't know if memberships that dropped in a couple months after Reno, if they didn't renew because of Reno, or whether they dropped out before Reno and gave up on the party because of COVID. There are so many factors here. They are doing guesswork. And again, let's pretend that there's just a bunch of members who didn't renew because they don't like the new direction. Well, what makes them more valuable than the ones that joined because of the new direction? I actually do membership renewal calls, unlike any that were mentioned in here. Maybe they do. They didn't say so. I talk with people and ask them why they didn't renew their membership. You want to know the number one reason? I can't afford it right now. Times are tough. You want to know the number two reason? The party, what has it done in the past whatever years? It fell on its face in COVID. You want to know what a distant runner, not even number three, probably number 4 or 5 I hear, is that damn Mises Caucus. That is rare. We all are in our little echo chamber and think this is a big deal to the average member. It isn't. They're worried about their funds. But without any data, this is just guesswork on their point. Correlation does not equal causation. So we're going to, you can read that, but that's what I have to say about that. Am I happy with membership numbers? No, I'm never happy with anything. I'm perpetually unhappy. Isn't that the libertarian way? But their assumption and their dismissal of members who wouldn't join before that join now as being more important is extremely problematic. Again, they ignore that a revolution happened in this party in 2022. They've got still some serious copium to do with that. So they do a summary of the financial membership reports. I think I've been through that. We're already at an hour. And by the way, I just want to give you guys some interesting information an hour in. The 4 people that did a thumbs down before the show even started, it stayed at 4. They stayed for like 2 seconds and left. That should tell you a lot. And by the way, thank you all for the thumbs up. Those have seriously outpaced the people at the very beginning. Then it goes on to a ballot access report. I think DL counted the number of words. It was like 150 words. It doesn't say anything except we have ballot access challenges. Okay, we know that. But it's funny. Now, let me get something right up front. I'm a 50+1 ballot access person. That's, if you go look at my voting record, I've always voted to support ballot access. But to just assume that everyone agrees on that, or that that's the best use or strategy of our money, is assuming your conclusion. You have to actually prove that. There has been a long-standing debate in this party, always has been. One reason why I wanted to be Region 1 in 2016, there were numerous reasons, but my predecessor, Region 1 representative in 2016, Norm Olson, voted against every ballot access measure. It is not a given that everyone thinks 50+1 ballot access is a good use of our money. A lot of people don't think it is. They look at the $500,000, something $250,000 to $500,000 price range every 4 years and say that's pissing money out the toilet, that we need to focus on lobbying, or we need to focus on this, or we need to focus on that. To just assume 50+1 ballot access is just obviously an obvious goal of the party. It is not, in fact, an obvious goal of the party. I think it should be, but not everyone agrees with me. And as they do correctly noted, some of the ballot access problems are caused by divisions within the states. Now, it's funny how they blame the LNC for that when the groundwork, say for New Mexico, for them to disaffiliate themselves was laid in place right before Reno because they knew what was coming. So you have a state party leadership that can't stand when they don't win a national election, then disaffiliates, and you're going to reward that by saying, or they allegedly disaffiliated. You know the whole argument with that. Let's just say they did. Let's just leave it at that. To say that's the people who legitimately won an election's fault is pretty damn rich. And later they will go on to obliquely mention Michigan. You have a group of people who could not follow their own bylaws. A couple people who rage quit after Reno, sending the Michigan party into turmoil. And you're blaming that on this LNC rather than baby shit attitudes where people can't stand things not going their way at a convention. You want to know how many years radicals were told to suck it up, Buttercup? Maybe you can just win next time. Mask off. So yes, ballot access is a challenge. And some of that challenge is because of divisions in state parties where they couldn't stand that they didn't win at Reno. You should be pointing the finger squarely at them. We will deal with those challenges. Though later, the way we're going to deal with them, you have a problem with. You can't have it both ways, sweetheart. Okay, recommendations for today. I have a clip from DL, and I realize I'm going to, if anyone has to run to the potty, there is a screenshot I forgot to get that I want to get. So we are going to break for a tiny second because I just remembered it and I don't want to do it right when I need it. Let me scroll down. Hopefully this account doesn't tweet as much as I do, and it doesn't look like it. I know I retweeted this meme. Oh, there it is. But God, when I go back, I'm just going to screenshot this. When I go back and like try to find a tweet of mine, I'm like, God damn, I spend way too much time on Twitter. Actually, I don't like that screenshot. It's too big. I think I froze there for a second. Okay, yeah, I'm going to screenshot it from here. Okay, I got the screenshot. Okay, so we're getting back to DL now. We skipped ahead a little bit, but under recommendations for today.
Arguing over adjusting for inflation in the last few days doesn't appear to have persuaded anyone. But let's move on and look at their recommendations for today. I fundamentally disagree with all of them. In this segment, we'll have my strongest criticism of the report. Not a single one provides historical metrics or ties them with data directly to any of the three key areas.
Yes, they are just, this is why the CLC is great, basically. But he's right. This is where the propaganda gets thick enough to cut with a knife. So the first bit is understanding and reversing membership decline. You don't deal with the CRM issues. You don't deal with the issues that there actually were people who joined who wouldn't join before. This is just assuming your conclusion and that our goal is the most members possible without any qualifications to that. It's like Nozikian side constraints. When you start dealing with utilitarianism, I know I'm really going off on a rabbit trail, with utilitarianism and deontological. I don't think those two are necessarily opposed to each other. You should always try to have the most good for the most people as long as you're not committing aggression. So you have constraints. We want the most members as possible without diluting or watering down our message or our mission, and not coddling people who leave because they don't like a particular LNC election. I'm sorry, those aren't the hardcore activists. They're not, and our membership is our activist base. The people that vote for us and just, it's more casual, that's not our hardcore activist base. And you can maximize voters. That's not the same as maximizing your activist base. You can even maximize donors that aren't members. But to not deal with any of that is not realistic and it's not honest. I think I have a quote here from DL on the membership thing, and this one is really telling if this clip is what I think it is, and the most tone-deaf part of this report, and the most huffing your own farts part.
Recommendation number 1, understanding and reversing membership decline. This LNC also needs to listen to the members, particularly lifetime members who are leaving, and not only listen, but also act on what they are being told. Real leadership serves those who lead, and that starts by listening first and acting second. Continuing to dismiss members' concerns will only further the decline. Many members have left stating that they no longer desire to be part of the party so long as members of the Mises Caucus were in the party. They used words like white supremacy and bigotry, among others. In order to listen to those members, the LNC would need to practically resign in its entirety and leave the party. This recommendation does not say to what end the LNC should listen to parting members.
Okay, I'm downloading something here because I think there's something I skipped that I need to look for, but that's exactly right. A lot of the people that have left has said it's me or them. So why should it be them instead of me? Or us or them, or however you want to word it. People with that kind of attitude, you're always going to have that. There are always going to be people, if they're not on top, that are going to leave. And you cannot coddle that. And I say that even for my own quote unquote people, because there were people who wouldn't join the party before. I always was part of the party, whether or not I was the part of the quote unquote faction in charge or not. I'm trying to download this report rather than just print because there's something I'm looking for. Okay. Yeah, I want to read this part of the report that I didn't highlight, but you can't say this. And I brought this up in the private emails with Jonathan Casey, and they had the opportunity to take this language out and didn't. This blows any semblance that they want to work with people or that they disagree that people with the point of view as some of the leadership, some of our messaging team belong in the party by this rhetoric. So with financial contributions dropped immediately after Reno, we got into all of that. Membership did not really start dropping till January 2023. Interesting, because that would have been people who could have checked out before Reno. But anyway, this timing also aligns with several high-profile embarrassments for the party. Well, you think they were embarrassments. You are assuming your conclusion. Rage Against the War Machine rally, I don't think that was an embarrassing. We're going to get into this lawsuit thing, so let's skip that for a second. But here's the part. Continued hateful and edgelord messaging. Jonathan Casey, you can kiss my fucking ass that you are calling David Benner hateful. Fuck off. Did I stutter? You do not call my friends hateful. Because you don't know their hearts. I think your messaging to other Libertarian Party members on Twitter has been fucking hateful. How do you like them bananas? Have there been missteps in messaging? There always has been. The meme that had went out inadvertently that had the happy merchant hands in it. You think they knew that was in there or noticed? Do you know the fast pace of Twitter? And immediately, and I was one of the LNC members that called for it to be taken down. That was never intentional. You know that quote that people tweet out every once in a while or put on Facebook that says you'll know who you can't criticize? You'll know who rules over you when you figure out who you can't criticize. You know that that's actually a quote by a well-known anti-Semite. I didn't. I once put that out on Facebook when I was a volunteer on the National Party Facebook page. Was that hateful? No, that wasn't my intent. I didn't know. When I found the meme, it was attributed to Voltaire. That's what I thought until somebody corrected me and let me know. There will always be missteps, particularly on Twitter. But hateful? You just tore the mask off your face right then. Hateful. Not simply things you disagree with. You just engaged in rank character assassination in this report. And you had the opportunity to remove that because I called you out on it privately and you didn't. I can tell you, the people I respect in the CLC, you should be calling out your leadership for that. That is absolutely improper. Shame on you. Okay, next one. Addressing internal challenges. So it talks about the turnover rate in staff. High turnover in staff is not unusual when you have a major restructuring of an organization. Sometimes people come in and are super brutal, like Elon Musk, who came in and just decimated staff. We could have done that. We didn't. In hindsight, who knows what was the right thing to do? But let's just say it's not unusual when you have a radical restructuring, a big seismic shift. Why aren't you talking about the staff that has stayed, that is extremely loyal and hardworking? You are using staff as your shield and an argument point, and shame on you for that. And here's the funny thing, is you, or even perhaps unhappy former staff, can say whatever they want and we can't respond because in today's culture, you'll get sued if you say anything bad about former employees. And I'm not suggesting there is anything bad to say. I am just saying even if there was, we couldn't. So you have absolutely the upper hand and can say whatever you want and make whatever insinuations you want. If you think that is fair or just, another reason why I don't think your vision for leadership is one that I want to buy onto.
The near 80% turnover rate in staff since Reno and rumors of a toxic environment is also a contributor to membership's lack of faith in leadership. A concerted effort should be made to create a positive working culture and to make sure staff aren't hampered by badly defined roles, lack of tools, or micromanagement by LNC members. Okay, first, let me nitpick here. Without confident polling, calling an 80% turnover rate in staff a, quote, contributor to membership's lack of faith in leadership, well, that's basically made up.
It is. It's what I called an ass fact. It means you squatted over and you pulled a fact straight out of your asshole. That's exactly what that is. Nice ass fact. But rumors of a toxic environment. Interesting. So you're rumor mongering now for something that we can't possibly respond to because of legal reasons, even if we wanted to? How do you know there's not a positive working culture? It's pretty much all remote now, which I think is pretty damn positive. How do you know they're hampered by badly defined roles? Who defined those roles? We inherited staff with defined roles. Are you blaming the last LNC for that? This makes literally no sense. Or micromanagement. LNC members are not micromanaging staff. I'm just going to absolutely refute that. Are there sometimes instances where LNC members can be out? I have been, but I do not micromanage staff, and neither does anyone else on the LNC. And you have no way of knowing if that is true or not.
Rumors of a toxic environment are anecdotal, not data or evidence, and it isn't clear how toxic environment is being defined. How can I agree or disagree without knowing how it's defined and having more than just rumors to work with?
But rumors are just so useful. In an objective report that is intended to change hearts and minds, you call people hateful and you speak of rumors. Don't you know that that's the way of integrity? Don't you know that, DL? Next, recommendation number 4, refocus messaging. Well, there's a lot of people who like our messaging. Why are you more important than them? You haven't really proven that unless, again, you are just assuming that maximizing the most numbers without taking into consideration other factors is just de facto right, and you have yet to prove that.
Refocus messaging. The LP should refocus its messaging to appeal to the broader liberty movement, not a small niche of it. Messaging has fallen into an echo chamber, and it isn't representative of most members. As members, donors, candidates, elected officials, and even affiliates disassociate, it is clear that the current messaging needs a change to stop driving people away. More on how messaging could be used to unite libertarians instead of divide them in the next section. Similar to recommendation number 2, this is speculation.
Right, it's simply made up. And let me just give you an example of New Mexico, where you talk about affiliates disassociating. You realize how absolutely dysfunctional the old New Mexico party was, and that we immediately have got a new affiliate there, which people who had completely lost interest in the New Mexico party, why don't you mention that? Why don't you mention there's actually excitement in that new affiliate, instead of looking at the old stagnant one that violated its bylaws in order to try to get its way because they were ass mad about Reno? This is just thoroughly dishonest. It is. It's just absolutely dishonest. And the fact is, our Twitter account and our social media presence has grown. That is the measure of success. You might not like the messaging, and others might not. But there are others who do. And in fact, the broader liberty movement has found the LPs. It depends on how you define broader. Do you mean the Cato Beltway libertarians? Or do you mean the hardcore Ron Paul libertarians? The people who never before would have joined a political party? It all depends upon where you're focusing. I think now we are serving the actual broader liberty movement, not liberty-ish movement. I think I have another DL quote.
That messaging is not representative of, quote, most members, their words, not mine, is not presented with supporting data. And how much of the messaging are we actually talking about? That's important to know because data from members might say that they either agree with or are unconcerned with, say, 80% of the messaging that goes out. That would leave 20% that is unsatisfactory. The next logical question is to what degree is the remaining 20% contributing to issues with, again, financial health, membership, and ballot access issues?
This reminds me very much of Ms. Epke's bill of particulars against me, which wasn't supported by any evidence. This reminds me so much of that. It is just vapid. I do membership renewal calls. I don't think I've ever had a member say they were not renewing because they didn't like something that was said on Twitter. I can give you just anecdotal evidence. In Colorado, we are fundraising more than we ever had when LPCO stopped being milquetoast. So this is just you projecting your particular preferences. I happen to think a lot of CLC messaging is dog shit and drives people away. I don't like it. I just don't follow it. I don't make it me leave the party. But you are just assuming your conclusion that yours is what appeals to the broader liberty movement. I actually think that's not the case. It's yours that draws less fire from the non-liberty movement, and you take that as affirmation. But you want to know what? Those people are going to hate you, no matter how much you virtue signal to them. And funny how you only mention once how the past LNC fell on its face during COVID, and you don't mention at all why Reno happened. Why did Reno happen? Because Nick Sarwark decided to get on Twitter and start attacking other libertarians. Is that what you want to return to? You don't mention any of the root causes of why we are here today, which means you say on one hand you don't want to go back to the past, but you don't really say what was wrong with the past that got us to where we are today. This is a fancy package that disguises that there's very little substance here. Next recommendation, and this one is just really dumb. Restoring customized candidate training programs. I went to the regional trainings. They were good. They were good. Kara is an excellent trainer. But do I think they were worth it? I had to travel for the Region 1 training from Colorado to Utah. No, that isn't the best use of national resources. That is what regions should be doing. Why do we have regional? I'm asking you in your view. I'm not criticizing our current regional representatives. What's the purpose of regional representatives if it's not them to organize this? Why do you think the national party is the answer to everything? Even going back to the ballot access section. Do you realize that's not really in the bylaws our role? Getting ballot access is the job of the state party. Now, I do believe we should come behind them and assist them. But the lead role on a lot of this stuff, because you also talk about affiliates doing crappy messaging. Are you top down or are you bottom up? You know, there were affiliates doing crappy messaging last LNC. You know, there were affiliates before one of your board members voted to disaffiliate Virginia. Dissolve Virginia. Funny how you don't mention how a very prominent member of the CLC had a hand in that. It's funny how that isn't mentioned. You talk about all of the strife in state parties without mentioning that one of your board members voted to illegally dissolve Virginia. My God, this is just, the more I think about it, it's dishonest through omission and so pretentiously self-righteous. The LP's Honey Badger is saying what she thinks. Honey Badger don't give a shit. But, no, the customized candidate training programs were not a good use of our resources. To have something on video would be, but to make people travel for these is not. And if it's done, it should be done at a regional level, not at a national level. Dustin Nana in the Libertarian Party of Ohio is having a great training weekend the end of July. You guys should go to it if you're anywhere near Ohio. It's, I think, July 24th through 25th. That's where it needs to take place. There's way too much of assumption of centralized planning in this report. But let's go to see what DL has to say about this.
Recall that in 2021, the prior LNC held a fundraising drive to raise $30,000 for an anti-mandate ad. I was very much in support, but was told by several people they refused to be a member or donate any money until the LNC proved itself to them. There are always members who are turned off by party messaging.
Okay, that should have went with the last one, so let's just back up a second. They raised $30,000. Do you remember that video that got put out? it was all stock video footage. It wasn't a bad video. And I put on a happy face at the time, glad they were just finally saying something. But come on now, in the future, let's admit it wasn't a good video. It certainly wasn't a $30,000 video. We have never gotten an accounting of that $30,000. Funny how that's just ignored. I want to know what happened to that $30,000. And yes, I have asked privately because I want to know, and there's still members who want to know. But DL, and I didn't grab the clip, said, I'm sorry, it's getting a little cold, so if you hear a heater. They give no data that a customized training program is better than what the Leadership Institute provides. Yes, the Leadership Institute is geared towards Republicans, but I've been to many Leadership Institute trainings, and all of it is useful. Republicans win. And good Leadership Institute trainers mention how to tailor it to a libertarian campaign. Why would you want to reinvent the wheel? And here I go, giving a compliment to someone I don't like. From what I understand, Nick's nonprofit is going to be doing libertarian training. What makes you think that the National Party needs to do that? That is things that could be better suited to groups that just concentrate on that. The National Party is doing regional trainings, but it's using the Leadership Institute, who has a proven track record of knowing how to run winning campaigns. You could like that or not like that, but to just assume that this was better, I went to them. They were good, but so are Leadership Institute trainings. And the fact that you had to travel to get to them, let me give a recommendation that they should have gave that I don't know if we're going to get to this term. The Libertarian Party needs an online learning management software platform, because you can't expect people to travel all this. You need secretary training, you need treasurer training, you need candidate training, you need campaign manager training, and all of this should be on demand with very qualified and professional teachers. And they shouldn't have to go from Colorado to Utah to go to one and stay a weekend. That's a big ask, even more so in a recessionary time period. You need to stop fetishizing things of the past. Things change. And yes, I'm glad you like Skeeto, my anarchy necklace. And here's one that I'm going to take big issue with because they're very sly. Recommendation number 6, stop suing libertarians. Okay. If a libertarian ran you over in the street and caused you injury, should you sue them for personal injury? Or is it just verboten? You can never sue a libertarian because they're libertarians and they're perfect. You can never sue them. It's just off limits. But what about if they committed fraud? You can't punish another libertarian for fraud? Is that what you're saying? And there are 2 suits. One of them is in Virginia. Are you saying we should have actually let people who were actively promoting Trump remain a Libertarian Party affiliate and use the Libertarian Party trademarks? Is that really what you're saying? Or are you saying, no, they don't count because they're not real libertarians? Is that what you're saying? Well, who defines a real libertarian? Is promoting Trump worse than committing outright fraud and violating your bylaws? I'd rather have an honest Trumper than a fraudster. But neither of them should be using the Libertarian Party name. You don't delve into any of this. If we weren't able to call a special convention in Virginia, should that board that even you admitted illegitimately dissolved an affiliate get sued? Or do you think you should just let people get away with that? This is utter propagandistic bullshit. You don't get into any of the details. If you are defending what's going on in Michigan with those fraudsters, may you never be near a leadership position anywhere. And one of your board members I don't think you ever even censured that person. Move to dissolve Virginia. Stop suing libertarians. The fact that a subject of a lawsuit is a libertarian is irrelevant. If you think the lawsuits are wrong, saying stop suing for these wrong reasons. Libertarians aren't perfect. They do wrong things, and they should be held just as accountable. And on one hand, you cry about ballot access, but you're defending the very people that are trying to cause us to lose ballot access in Michigan. Unless you think we should just ignore the bylaws. Do libertarians believe in contracts or not? This is such a bullshit, full of shit thing, because you don't deal with any of the details because you can't. You would be defending the worst behavior. Unless, I don't know, maybe let's pretend you're from one, I don't even know what state Casey is from, because I don't care. Most states, unless they're violating their bylaws and member rights and cause themselves to rise to national attention, I do not mind states' business. And this is going to be a long show. This might be one of my 3-hour ones, because we're going to get into some mask off time with what the CLC pulled with Colorado. But how would you like it? Well, I'm just going to pretend, Jonathan, that you're from one of the states that's more Prague controlled. How would you like it if a bunch of Mises people just set up a rival board and your judicial committee ruled against this rival board, but they just continued anyway, belligerently, and ruined your ballot access and ruined your standing and siphoned off donors and spread lies? Would that be okay with you? Or is it just okay in Michigan because their legitimate board is people you don't agree with? Fucking hypocrites. Next, fewer secret meetings. This one really gets me. Executive sessions have proliferating during this LNC, more than any in recent memory. No numbers are given, but I did the numbers, and there have been more executive session meetings. But what does that mean? First of all, we have more meetings. We have had as many meetings in the first half of this term, 29, that the past LNC, if you combine LNC and executive committee meetings, had the entire last term. So we're going to double the amount of meetings. But even taking that into consideration, there have been more executive sessions because there have been more issues. What makes you think there are more secret discussions this term than any other term? You just know about them. I've been on the LNC since 2016. You are wrong. You just didn't know about them. And Angela is a different kind of chair. She involves the LNC in her decisions, which require executive session. The past LNCs, Joe Bishop Henchman, Nick Sarwark, governed more like kings and didn't let the LNC know what they were doing, so there was no need for as many executive sessions. You just throw that out there as if it is just obvious that is bad, when I can tell you, as someone who's been on the LNC since 2016, you're full of shit. It's actually a good thing. And there are certain things under the bylaws that need to be kept secret. Contractual negotiations, staff issues. Funny, I guess not enough is blabbed about staff that you rely upon rumors, which is disgusting, and legal issues. There wouldn't be so many legal issues if people weren't pulling fraudulent crap, like one of your board members did in Virginia. Now, here, this is probably going to be a 3-hour one. Recommendations going forward. Dallas Accord 2.0. I love, and by love, I mean I absolutely hate, when special interest groups like this whore the Dallas Accord. The Dallas Accord, if you don't know, is when we amended the Statement of Principles. Nothing else deserves to be called a Dallas Accord. Are you suggesting amending the Statement of Principles, Mr. Casey? Are you suggesting amending the bylaws? If you're not, those words should not enter your mouth. It shows a historical ignorance and a cheapening of what the Dallas Accord actually was. So, the Libertarian Party needs to get back to basics, work to get candidates on the ballot, get candidates elected, get legislation passed while staying true to its principles. These are the purposes for which it exists, and anything outside those goals can be better done by other organizations. Really? Is that what our bylaws say, Jonathan, or do you know better? Are you proposing amending the bylaws? You are parroting the talking points of prags throughout the ages who say we only exist electorally. But is that true? It's not what our bylaws say. Those are certainly most of the goals in our bylaws or purposes, but it's not all of them. And for you to not mention that is interesting. First of all, let's take a look at why the party was founded. You can go to Lpedia and look up The Case for a Libertarian Political Party by David Nolan. We're not going to go through all of this. I've done it on another show. But I want you to look at the last sentence. He goes through 6 bullet points that are the reasons for a libertarian political party. And notice the last sentence. And finally, and I noticed when I typed this in, I missed a D and. There is always the possibility we might actually get some libertarians elected. Actual elections was an afterthought in the founding of the party. Now, you might think we moved on from then, but you haven't shown any awareness of our history while invoking 1970s history. And also, I want to go back to here, I think. No, that's not it. Maybe it would be here. Let's look at this screenshot. Yeah, here's the Libertarian Party bylaws. Oh no, that's Colorado's. Where's the national one? I had the national ones. Let me see if I can find it. Otherwise, we'll just pull it up on the website. We're going to get to Colorado in a minute because I am so glad I waited to do this report card because the shit the CLC pulled with Colorado shows you they don't believe half of what they said in this. I think this is all Colorado. Let's pull up the national, or I'll at least read the national bylaws. I'm going to do it from memory. We don't need to waste time on that. One of the purposes is entering into educational activities. You might think that might be better done by an outside organization, but electoral politics is not the only purpose. Another purpose is supporting our affiliates. You want to know how you support your affiliates? By not letting a rogue board take over and use the party's trademarks. Funny how you didn't mention that either. There are more purposes than what you said. You might think you have the right to redefine the party purposes and say, like Justin Amash does, that other things can be done better by other organizations, then try to amend the bylaws. Until then, you're just wrong. By definition, a political party must appeal to the largest possible group of people. Is that necessarily true? By definition? Is it? I don't think that's true by definition. I think you need to appeal to an effective group of people. Not necessarily the largest group of people. Bill Weld was trying to appeal to a large group of people. How did that turn out? And then he talks about skewing our messaging hard to one side or another without providing examples. Our party in the past has been extremely weak on messaging. Point to where messaging has been skewed. You might not agree with some of the interpretation of the platform, but that is the duty of the LNC. Not skewing your words is an interpretation. I have a feeling what you are referring to is things that you later call the quote-unquote culture war. But what is the culture war? Was abortion the culture war? Are you upset that that plank was deleted? Culture war happens to be when today, it seems to, when people say things on an issue that you just don't agree with. You don't like, I'm guessing, because you didn't actually give details, that the National Party has taken a stand saying that children can't consent to certain things. Is that a culture war thing? No, it's a platform thing where it says that children are entitled to be free from abuse. Now, you might not agree with the interpretation of abuse, but the fact is that is what our platform says. Should we ignore that part of our platform because you say it's culture war? Well, delegates said otherwise. You also don't like messaging on secession. Secession is explicitly part of our platform, whether you like it or not. You, in fact, have explicitly gone against the platform by arguing against it. Now, you could say you are arguing that the time isn't right. I didn't get that impression. I got the impression that you just think the idea itself is bad. Now, you have every right to have that opinion, but because a certain message isn't tailored to you doesn't mean that it is not broad libertarian messaging or it isn't true to our principles or on platform. I would love for you to point out ones that are not on platform or within our principles. Our principles are actually quite narrow. A time for a libertarian party that is neutral ground for libertarians, that has never been our purpose. Because the word libertarian is quite broad, particularly if you take into account European libertarians. We're not communists. We're not socialists. We are capitalists. So we're not neutral. We don't think children should be abused. We're not neutral. At one point, and I disagreed with the deletion of this plank, we weren't neutral on abortion. It's not a neutral ground. The only reason you're saying that is because some of the messaging happens to be ones you don't agree with. Well, you want to know what? Welcome to our world, the radicals say, since most of the time the National Party has given messaging that we don't agree with. And you want to know what we were told? Suck it up, buttercup. You don't like it when the shoe is on the other foot, do you? We need a party that is tolerant of the entire, notice the word entire, intellectual and personal diversity of all libertarians. Our platform isn't. Are you saying that our platform is bad and intolerant and hateful? No. We need a party that reflects our platform. And that is, in fact, what we have. And then later you say messaging that goes beyond our platform is bad. And I agree with you. I think it contradicts with what you said earlier. Name something off platform. Because I can tell you, and I'm not going to say they're 100% on platform because no one ever is. I can tell you as an APRC member, when I think something's off platform, I challenge it. It says, ultimately, professional messaging isn't focused on causing reaction. Actually, it is. In today's world, it is. But let's put that aside for a second. Because people want to feel something, and when you get people to feel something, they do something. It is focused on achieving real-world results, attracting members, donors, and candidates, and it has. Might not be the members, donors, and candidates that you prefer. And it says the current messaging has harmed those real-world metrics. You provided no evidence of that. And you haven't provided contra evidence that it hasn't drawn in people. And I know for a matter of fact, it has. Okay. And the rest is an ad for your caucus, which you are perfectly entitled to do. Now, oh boy, I'm going to try to keep this. We're going to hurry up the rest. But he talks about unity and all this other kind of stuff. Meanwhile, less than 24 hours after something that came out in Colorado, where the board of Colorado is trying a different strategy, you stick your mustache into Colorado's business and actually call for Colorado to be disaffiliated. How unifying, how broad, how neutral libertarian ground, how not engaging in retaliatory actions against other libertarians. Here's what Colorado has to say to you, Jonathan Casey. How dare you, 24 hours after something, without ever even talking to the Colorado board, how dare you call for disaffiliation of the affiliate that is the birthplace of the Libertarian Party? You have a lot of nerve. I hope you never come here. And I'm not even 100% on board with the LPCO's strategy. But the board is elected to do that. See, I am demonstrating a maturity that you were unable to do. I talked to the board respectfully about my concerns. One of my concerns was a bylaws concern. They immediately rectified it, even knowing that I had some disagreements with the strategy, because I didn't come at them like an asshole. I came at them with the respect due to the positions to which they were elected and asked them to correct it. And they immediately called a special meeting and corrected it. You can't go on about peace and love and unity and live, love, laugh, and whatever other like touchy-feely stuff in here. Meanwhile, a few weeks later, within 24 hours of a new board's announcing a strategy calling for disaffiliation without ever engaging in dialogue with them. And what was the great sin of Colorado? You misrepresented it. They did not say they were going to endorse Republican candidates, but you tried to make it out to be that. Colorado is a blue state. We have one-party rule here. The board is trying to find a way to break that. I don't have to agree with everything they do, but I do have to not misrepresent it, and so do you, particularly as an out-of-stater. We have very good ballot access laws here. Mike probably knows the exact numbers, but we can nominate like 70 people at our convention. We never nominate anyone for each of the races. So if we have a limited pool of candidates, it is not unreasonable to say we should focus on X races because less than typically terrible Republican candidates are running in Y races. That does not mean you are endorsing those Republicans. It is recognizing limited candidates and limited resources and saying, in the dire socialist hellhole that Colorado is turning into, that it is more wise for the cause of liberty to focus on X rather than Y. Okay, Mike said 126 offices we can nominate for. We never do that. So to say we're going to strategically focus our resources on these 10 races, that is not outlandish. It is not violating the national bylaws, and it is not endorsing Republicans. But for you to just pretend that in every state, the Republicans and Democrats are equally bad, you're batshit. That's not true. In a red state, you need to partner with Democrats. In a blue state, you need to partner with Republicans a lot of the times to have some less bad outcomes. We had most awful gun control legislation tried to be pushed here in Colorado by the Democrats. I'm sorry, the Republicans were our allies in that. To pretend like in every issue in every state, both sides are equally bad is just retarded. Now, the Colorado GOP can suggest anything they want. Talk to the LPCO, or are you all of a suddenly believing what the Republicans say now? We can't control what the Republicans say. Yes, they called us spoilers. That is their opinion. What do you expect Republicans to say? Are we now to talk police the Republicans? Should the Republicans be able to demand that I get censored because I said to the Republican Party to kiss my libertarian ass? No, it doesn't go that way. We just get to thought police the Republicans? Oh, I get it. No, it doesn't work that way in politics. They are going to spin it to their base. That's what political parties do. We're going to spin it to our base. And I don't even necessarily 100% agree with the strategy, but I will defend my affiliate and I will defend the board's right to set strategy. We have been spinning our wheels here. I am grateful that they're brave enough to try something new. It will work or it won't, but we can't be worse off than we are now. And if being nice to them will keep, and it might not work, but if it has a remote chance to stop further shitty ballot access bills from getting sponsored by Republicans, that's a win. You guys are so frickin' black and white that you want to throw people under the bus for having just a slightly different point of view. And I'm defending people who have a point of view that's slightly different than mine. But I am not going to throw them to the wolves and tear them apart the way I've seen other libertarians doing. Shame on you. You want to know what? You do your state, Dave. Don't worry about fucking Colorado. Colorado can worry about Colorado. I don't want other people minding our business. It is a different landscape here than it is in other states. We don't mind your business. You don't mind ours. Our board could be making a terrible mistake, but you want to know what? Nothing comes without risk. The chair of the GOP here is, when it comes to Republicans, much closer to us than most Republicans. It is not a bad idea here. Me, I am a Libertarian Party partisan loyalist. So I believe in running candidates in every single race. But I am not so strident that anyone who disagrees with me is burn the heretic and my way is the only way. You want to know what? I'm not the chair. You think I agree with every decision that Angela makes? No, but I'm not the chair. She was elected to make those decisions. The LPCO board was elected to make those decisions, and they'll bear the consequences if they're bad. But we are in dire straits here in Colorado. We are desperate. It is uniparty rule. But something I want to show you that I think is funny, because the strategy that the Colorado board is proposing is actually quite pragmatic, which is probably why, why I'm not, completely on board, but I am on board behind supporting my board. And you ain't coming for the Colorado board, and you ain't coming for Colorado. You stick your dirty fingers in Colorado and you'll pull out a stump. But I wanted to show you a funny meme from Colorado because, again, their strategy is very pragmatic. I love this meme. When you out-prag the prags, but the prag's still mad. Because I want to show you guys something. It's right here. So, who do the prags always really like? They like Cato, don't they? I don't care for Cato. But here's something really, really funny. Are you going to throw these people out of the broader neutral libertarian movement that you were just touting? It's funny that I found this. Now, do I agree with this article? No. But this is Libertarians, a case for a different Libertarian Party. I would actually encourage you to go read this because it actually says that the Libertarian bylaws should be amended to endorse Republican candidates. And it lays out, I don't agree with it, but it lays out a coherent case on how we would further libertarianism better if we followed this strategy. The date on this is 2008. This is an ongoing debate in the Libertarian Party. What the LPCO has proposed is actually quite modest. These debates have been going on a long time. I bet you the LPCO has even tried this strategy before. I haven't looked back through old newsletters. I know multiple other parties have. We'll see how it goes. We shall see. But they cured, there was a potential Colorado bylaws violation. I think it was a definite violation, but the board did not want to have a whiff of a bylaws violation. So they clarified that their intent, and they sent a copy of the resolution to the GOP, that their intent was not to suggest that the board has any control over what candidates we run. That their intent was that they were going to develop some criteria by which they would try to persuade delegates to concentrate on different races in which we could win. And there was a gentleman's agreement that on certain races we identified, the GOP would back off. Will they honor that? I don't know. But it's worth a try to get libertarians elected. Is it a strategy I would have developed? No. But I am not the board, and I do not regret for a second my voting for any single one of them. And I am glad that they are daring to try, even if I wouldn't have been a person to propose that. We've got to stop attacking people. And the fact is, I'm working with the LPCO right now on a potential coalition with the Greens. They are not Republican operatives. And shame on you, all of you who would accuse them of such. You do not know them. I do. But it's mask off for the CLC less than 24 hours after this developing situation to call for the disaffiliation of Colorado. Nasty, nasty business. You don't act like that. It just goes to show that you're willing to do that when it's a board you don't like. But you turn a blind eye to blatant fraud in Michigan. Shame on you. We kept it at just over 2 hours. I'm going to stick around to see if there are any further questions. I promised you I would be blunt. Again, this isn't meant as any kind of condemnation of everyone in a caucus. That's stupid. There's lots of great people in the CLC. There's the vast majority of them, even the people that wrote this report, think that they're doing what's best for the party. But that report is a steaming hunk of shit. It's not helpful, and it's not neutral. It's just a propaganda piece. And really, any board members, including the ones that I respect that voted for this, you really ought to rethink that decision. That was not right. And it is not the way to treat the elected leadership of this party when you just happen to disagree, but there's no corruption. I tend to treat elected leadership of a voluntary group with a good deal of deference, unless I think they're corrupt. And I think I proved that last time. If you listen to some of those videos that I now want to puke at how much respect I showed to Joe Bishop Henchman because of virtue of his position, even though I didn't agree with him before he turned corrupt. You need to straighten up and fly right. You think you're the righteous one in this discussion, and you're not. And here's what's funny. The pretentiousness oozed throughout this report. I know it's baffling to some of the respectability politics people as to why I'm so popular. Certainly there are people, Chris Frazier, JJ, certainly there are people who hate my guts. But in general, I'm pretty popular in the Libertarian Party. And who am I popular with? I'm not popular with the highbrow respectability people. I'm popular with the rank and file. And why is that? Because I don't put on airs. I don't pull crap like this. I tell you exactly how I feel. I tell you when something's good. I tell you when something's bad. And I always try to act with integrity and raw authenticity, not polishing turds, not political bullshit. And that is why people like me. And that is a lesson that some people that I've mentioned by name multiple times in the show need to learn the lesson of. If you're wondering why such a raw around the edges person got the amount of support I did, that is why. And that's what people value more than some of this highfalutin stuff. It's serious. You need to not put out propaganda. Put out the truth. Both good and bad. And if your ideas are better, people will flock to them because they respond to authenticity. Authenticity is way more important than being polished. One thing Trump should have taught us is that I don't care for the guy, and I certainly hope he's not our president again. But one thing he is pretty authentic. He's authentically terrible, but people like him because he didn't put on the political airs. And people are responding to the current Libertarian Party. It might not be the people you want. It might not be the Beltway Libertarians. But you want to know what? I'm going to end this show on a productive note. Anyone who had a hand in authoring that report, or even Mr. Casey, we have a year left. Start coming to LNC meetings. Start giving input and public comment. Start volunteering to do things that could lead things in a direction that you prefer or could help in the things you think are important. Layla Bush has done that. She's a valued member of the Ballot Access Committee. Be more like Layla. But the rest of you are just sniping from the sidelines. I'm extending the invitation to you. Come help. Let's start seeing you. Let's start hearing from you. Let's start seeing you identify a problem and saying, you want to know what? I can help there. And then if we just utterly reject you, just go do it on your own like I did. Rather than sniping from the sidelines with this Game of Thrones bullshit that you're just worried about who's going to get elected in 2024 to the LNC. And it just proves right that saying that the amount of viciousness in the group is inversely proportional to the amount of actual power at stake. We are losing our country, and this is what you're concentrating on. Okay, everyone, I'm tired now, and I'm hungry, and I'm going to go eat a pizza. There could have been some things I said in the show that are off base. If it's pointed out to me, I will readily admit it like I do. But I come to you as I am. And I've always promised to do so. I hope you have an awesome night. And maybe see you tomorrow for a history show. Otherwise, I hope to see a lot of you at Port Fest. And Yeah, the 4 dislikes, the 4 lonely dislikes are still the only ones during the show because they didn't stick around to even hear. Bye.
Gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to